It was around last year, this time, that I sent in the proposal for the show at Stride, at the PRAIRE CROCUS Gallery, the window space at Stride Gallery, downtown in Calgary. I was relatively new to the country, to the city at that time. And one of the things that was not one of the things that interests me at that time, and I think it still does now to some extent, were the buildings. Trinidad, as everybody knows, does not have as many buildings as other places. We have the Hyatt, we have some of the government buildings downtown, Nicholas Towers, but it's not a real skyline as compared to some of these bigger cities. And Calgary is not such a big city, but it's big enough to make any comparison between it and Port of Spain useless. So I was interested in those buildings that they have downtown, how the light interacts with them, the colors that happen to them, the architecture in some sense, and how, by just looking at them, and the monotony of the designs, because it's just rectangles after rectangles, squares after squares, geometric shape after geometric shape, you somehow form some kind of structure. And so I did my proposal on that. The work is a series of prints, not even a series. It's basically monoprints, done very tediously, using a lino block reduction method, multicolor prints, of 11, I believe, buildings in Calgary. The work was an interesting thing to make. I think it did not take me an entire year to make. I started working on the project probably in the summer, on and off amongst my other responsibilities, and finished it maybe in September, October. And much of the printing did occur and finish in August. It wasn't the printing necessarily that was the most tedious, I think, of it, but it was the preparation and install, where I think the work got transformed from being a two-dimensional representation of these three-dimensional forms to becoming its own three-dimensional thing, at least in how it's presented. It's my first time, I think, playing around with print in such a way, a two-dimensional form. And it works, I think, in some sense. To get the idea I had across when I wrote the proposal, it's the interesting thing about, I think, doing long projects like this, or projects that have spanned the entirety of a year, is that your ideas and your thought processes change as you go, and my interpretation of the subject matter has changed as I've grown more accustomed to living here in Calgary and seeing the buildings and interacting with them in whatever limited way I do. It left me at an interesting place after I finished the installation earlier this month, where I looked at the work and I was happy with it. I was satisfied with it, but I was also felt very disjointed from it in some sense, because I did not feel like this was necessarily a representation of what I thought at the current moment, which is not something that I can really put a finger on necessarily. My interpretation of the city has really changed from my
Gun
what I would
violence
say is my
might be.
initial reactions to it. Um, I'm not really quite sure how to place what it has changed to because I'm still trying to figure that out. Nonetheless, the work is the work, and it will be added to. I think. I don't know how or in what way, but I think in some ways it will be changed or recontextualized to maybe greater encompass what my mindset is at. I also had a thought about the work as an archive. The archives have been coming up a lot recently in my thoughts and discussions with my peers. And the work itself does in some way present as archive in sense it's a data set of the current cityscape of the city. It's not a very comprehensive data set because it doesn't get every single building, but it definitely does offer some form of information for somebody who's looking at what can be viewed in some necessity. And one way of viewing something, the buildings in particular, here in Calgary at this specific time and place in the world. And so one part of me thinks maybe that should be expanded on in sense to create that data set more, that archive more cohesive to itself, more encompassing the entirety of the city, making more prints, doing more research, etc. And to me, in some sense, that's probably a direction I might take in as I approach it, the work again in the future when I want to show it or when I want to recontextualize it. I might not necessarily destroy or repurpose some of the work that is already created, but add to it to greater build that archive and that data set, but also greater push and expand on my thought process into how I view the city as well.